What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracy, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up to all the difference makers out there? I am so pumped for this conversation we're about to have. This is going to be a game changer for me. Everybody knows mindset matters. Like, what we think matters so much, and we're going to dive into so much of this. I'm hoping to talk about some NLP, which has been some life-changing stuff for me, and so really cool, and I talk about all the time how you meet people. Our last episode, we talked about how people come into your life and connections. I met our guest this week, Trice Berlinski, during the pandemic. And I had a friend, Michelle Hilwa, that had invited me out, and another couple of my friends who've also been guests on Coffee and Grit, the Whites, Jason and Misty White, were out there as well. And then maybe 2 months ago, I was doing an episode and Johnny was in the studio, and he was telling me how Trice was in the studio here and mentioned that she knew me. And I'm like, oh my God. So reconnected with her. We had an awesome conversation. And again, I'm super excited to dive into it because there's some life-changing stuff here. So Trice, welcome back and welcome to the studio. I know you've been in here before for another podcast.
Yes. Thanks, Jason. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So where do we start?
Probably with what you just did, right? Just
Yeah.
taking a breath. You've been going. I know I walked in, you just finished up another podcast, and just, as you know, taking those transition breaths. I was on my way in listening to Dr. Amen talking about how to use the breath to help with anxiety. And there's many different methods out there. And what I literally, as I walked into this studio, was on the phone with my college student who's 19, going to college at Oregon State University, and she's stressed. It's exam time. We're flying out for a cruise this week, and so she's got to leave tomorrow and double shift, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
Trying to find a new apartment, breaking out with eczema. And she knows all this stuff I've been teaching her since she was in third grade. And so, it's just integrating those new tricks and tips and tools all the time. So I said, just heard this from Dr. Amen. Just breathe in to a count of 4, hold for a second and a half, and then breathe out to a count of 8. Hold for another second and a half. Hold or do that 4 times. It's going to change. It turns on your parasympathetic nervous system. We're in charge. That's what's life-changing. We're consciously altering our physiology now. And we never knew that. Like, when we were babies, our parents didn't know that, right?
They really didn't.
Fascinating.
It's becoming more and more common, and what I love about having these types of conversations is a lot of what we're going to talk about has been for years considered woo-woo, right? But it's science.
Yep.
It's science. It's what makes this any more woo-woo than anything else that we study.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I love that. I believe I was born into this world at this time that time when I was born for this reason, because I had this innate feeling or knowing as a kid about the connection between all the things, and that science one day would basically marry even religion. And even Dr. Dispenza talks about that what he's teaching is the language of the divine, right? And so it is like right before we started, I was saying, like, what a small world. And so if you think about how right now in the world, how divisive things are, and I'm not very well studied with all of the world things, but I know in America things are pretty divisive, and that we have the capacity to bring things together.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be that way. And I truly, beyond a shadow of a doubt, believe that this is evolution, that we have this opportunity, we have the conscious awareness. Of course, it was happening, meditation practices were happening as a part of Eastern traditions for a long time.
Yeah.
But you can see that how it was at the time that it was needed, which is right around the time that smartphones became accessible to kids, is the same time, which is around 11 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
that this became accessible as well. Mindfulness meditation, which is what is my specialty. And it's like, in nature, and this fascinates me, there's a saying that within 3 feet of the poison is the cure. And I think to myself, the distance between our brain and our gut. I haven't measured it. I probably should.
Yeah.
But, right? Like the poison.
Yep.
Stuff we think, sometimes even the stuff we feel.
Man.
How it but that we have control with the breath,
Yep.
with conscious awareness. And again, people who don't really understand it, I had so many people, adults who are very intelligent, say, I just can't do it. So I'll give you your money back.
I'll give you your money.
I'll show you. I guarantee.
Well, and you talked about creating reality and how it's possible. Like it's so much so that like when you make a statement like the world is divisive, like I have a like innate to be like, no, it's not. But I know how it is. I just don't watch the news, and my world and reality is completely different. I hang out with people like you. I was having a conversation the other day, and it's like, with Brian Triskowski, who I just recently learned while we were having a conversation that you two are really well connected, which is awesome. Yeah. So me and Brian met for coffee a couple weeks ago, and we were having this conversation about how politics exist, but I don't have many political conversations with people. Like I have these conversations with people that are completely different. I don't know where people even stand on the realm of things.
Same.
But we have so many things in common and alike, and we don't sit and have these divisive arguments. We may not agree on all things, but it's just we listen for insight. Like I don't have to agree with everything that Brian says, but when I listen to him, I can understand a different point of view. Right.
Well, and I mean, it's part of who we are and what we study, but then also having tolerance for the fact that, and I don't watch the news either.
Yeah.
But I hear about it from people,
yeah.
And they ask me questions about it, and I learn from them, and I prefer to do that because I don't want to inundate myself with those fear-based thoughts and the media and all the things that are blown out of proportion. But I learn and I hear things, and I think, even to not judge them, right, and just to have tolerance and to teach through example, because I have found that it's like magic what's in our hands, what we have at our fingertips. But no matter how amazing, when I teach young kids, I'll tell them how I've manifested money to come to me. And I tell them amazing stories, a car, furniture, finally figured out how to do the right relationship, how to get that, right?
Yeah,
and that was a big one for me, because I thought for a while, it's like, oh, can you manifest a person? Specific person, or is it more the energy of what a person would be like, right? And it's the latter, in my opinion. But anyway, it's like these things are amazing, but there's still, if people don't have that drive and motivation, then they're not interested in doing the work, because it literally is like going to the gym, and you see more and more athletes or people who are like David Asprey and other people who are, I watch podcasts too, who are into fitness, talking about, like you said, the mental game.
I look at it as I'm a kind of a Star Wars nerd, like mastering the ways of the Jedi, right? And so for me, this is kind of my journey. I had a horrible mindset. I grew up a victim. I was, grew up poor, an abusive dad, all these things, grew up in welfare, all these things. But however, like when I remember, I was probably 17, 18, I'd think of certain people, and all of a sudden they would show up. And it was constantly happening. I would like think of somebody, or like see somebody that reminded me of somebody, and they'd pop in my head and I'd think about them, and it wasn't them, but a few minutes later, that person walked into the room, and it was like, whoa, how'd they get here? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I remember this was like early on when I realized that I can control things with my mind, and I was getting sick. And I remember thinking like, I don't have time to get sick, right? And so I was thinking like, man, all I feel is this feeling of being sick. What did I feel like when I wasn't sick? And I started thinking about what I felt like before I got sick. And I started like really keying in on those feelings. Like, and I don't even know how I started thinking about this, because I don't know like how my mindset thought like this at this time. It just kind of stumbled upon it. And I just was really like, at the time, I could, looking back at it, meditating and convincing my body that it felt that way, like envisioning it, tasting it, smelling it. And from that point forward, I didn't get sick for several years. Like my brother's a very sickly person, and like I did not get any kind of flu or anything. Like whenever other people would be sick around me, I would just go right through it.
Yeah. And one of the lines that Dispenza always talks about, I'm one of his certified consultants, so his words come to my head a lot, but simply that if your thoughts can make you sick, isn't it true that they can also make you well? You know, and one of my favorite stories, it was actually during the pandemic, and my business life really shifted, and I did an abundance meditation, one that Deepak Chopra led, and then one of Dispenza's abundance meditations the night before. And I actually had some resistance to doing the Deepak Chopra one, but then I thought, well, my really good friend is leading this group. I'm just gonna embrace it. So I'd been doing those for several days, and I just added in Joe's just to give perspective. And abundance is really about freedom. It's not about money, but this story is related to money more, and that can lead to freedom. So the next day I was out mowing the lawn, and I came in for a water break, and a good friend, a very successful woman in my life, said, hey, I know things must be a little tough right now. It was before self-employed people were getting any assistance. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah. And she goes, I would like to offer you a gift and, money. And immediately there was this like feeling in my gut, like an unpleasant feeling. I thought, I can't take that. And I went out to mow. I'm not going to answer. So again, that's part of, the training. So people are so reactive. I just chose to not be reactive and just go mow the lawn some more. And just struck me, Jason. I was like, why would I do abundance meditations and not accept the abundance? And how many times in my life? So that was one huge aha. And then the second was that there were times in my life where I had a lot more money than I did at that moment. And I helped people in the same monetary amount that she had helped me with. Yeah. And I felt amazing. I always remember those moments of feeling so good that I helped someone. I thought, why would I want to deny someone that? And then the rest of that year of 2020 that I did that abundance meditation, the Dispenza one, I got money the next day. And it kept getting smaller and smaller. It was sort of interesting. The very last time was a penny, but it was just so interesting, right?
Let's put that meditation in the right? In the links. We'll all be following it. But I love how you keyed in on that, because I think there's a lot of people's natural reaction. We look at ourselves as like a burden. It's like almost
not worthy.
A handout, a pity. You look at it as pity, being prideful, all these things that get in the way of an opportunity. You're doing these meditations to get to find abundance, and somebody offers you abundance. You're like, no, thank you. Right. It's like being in the freezing cold. Like, man, I wish I just had heat. And somebody come by and like, do you want to ride? No, I'm looking for heat.
Yeah. So we tend to draw. And science has proven we attract what we focus on. Yeah. But we're naturally wired prehistorically to focus on the negative to survive. But now it's the opposite, right? Things have shifted. And if we don't catch up with the game, that stress, anxiety, the depression, there's an epidemic of mental health issues or brain health issues.
I had my brother on our 100th episode a couple episodes ago, and he talked about how like people die from a young age, not because poor people die younger, not because of healthcare per se. It's not that healthcare is poorer. It's because of the stress and the anxiety that causes all of the ill cancer and everything in your body. It causes heart attacks. It causes all the having that stress of money, not having that freedom causes all the problems. It's not the healthcare per se.
Right. And so years ago, I worked for this fabulous organization still around called Inner Explorer. So it's an online mindfulness meditation for schools, for kids. And their tagline was that their program could break the chains of poverty. And you would think, how can meditation break the chains of poverty, right? Mm-hmm. And so this was years ago. So now, yesterday, I was helping my daughter write a paper. She goes to school in Corvallis, and she's near Portland, Oregon, where people are living in tents on the side of the highway. Poverty is a big deal. And so she had to write the paper on like, how can she come up with something that could help break that? And I said, I know I always talk about this because I love it, but it's getting at the core of the issue. And maybe it doesn't help everyone. Maybe someone with a significant mental disability can't access it. Although I've worked in schools where kids with autism and cognitive impairment, it made a huge difference for some of them. Mm-hmm. One kid actually, and I'm diverting off to a different story, but one kid was big into sports, but he would lose his temper. And the meditation, the mindfulness classes helped him be able to gain his composure enough. And they saw this. I have a testimony from his teacher. They saw the shift. They saw him using the skills during the games. And he went on to the Special Olympics with his team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's mindset. Just like literally being able to stop and take that breath.
Right. So Jason, why don't more people do it? Right.
Why don't more people do it?
I know people want drive-through.
Yeah. Yep.
They want the drive-through quick and then they get mad.
They want to fix the surface problems. They want a Band-Aid. They want the easy button.
No.
I've said this quote a few times in the last few episodes, but the truth will set you free, but at first it'll piss you off.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
And you talked about starting at the core,
Mm-hmm.
Going back in a lot of my natural reactions that caused my trauma, caused me to be in bad times were from natural reactions and natural behaviors that were as I got to know were formed from when I was young, right? Opinions that I had of myself based off of words that were told to me when I was young, for example.
Yeah. And that stuff's deep.
It's deep.
Yeah. You're not, and that's why one of the things with meditation, and there's other practices too that help with bring up that awareness. And people often will get triggered and they don't know what to do with it. And it's a delicate subject because it depends on the issue. And there's different ways to go about it. So if someone had, sexual abuse, for example, doing perhaps a body scan meditation may not be the best way. Mm-hmm. But there's so many ways to use these skills now. It doesn't have to be just one way. And it's almost always about relaxing and going in and embracing whatever that feeling is, because otherwise energetically, and again, this is science, like you said, not woo-woo, but those emotions have a grip on us. Mm-hmm. And so I always say, because it's a good visual, if you can imagine that you see you're in a car and you're about to crash, people have this tendency to stiffen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And anyone who might be asleep, or if people are drunk in a vehicle, right, and they're passed out, they're not stiffening. So it's that relaxation. They don't get as injured.
Yep.
And so when we push stuff down, when we're stiff, and we're John Kabat-Zinn always says, what we resist persists, right? So it's like you're doing that. And then instead, if you bring it in, right, then for me, I recovered from depression that way. It was hard because you don't want to sit with that difficult feeling. And I know when I talked with Brian about these kinds of things, he was like, yeah, I go out into nature.
Yeah.
Our brains automatically shift into a more meditative brainwave state in nature. So it automatically gives you an easy way in.
Yeah.
But then, literally embracing and being curious. Curiosity is the opposite of judgment. So being curious about that feeling. But again, who wants to go into that? Right? That's like going down a dark alley.
Yeah.
But I remember the moment when I knew it worked, and the last time it took a big hold on me, and I was headed into actually teaching an intro to meditation class up north. And I was like, wow, that's back. And I was running early, so I just pulled over, and for 5 minutes, I just embraced. And it like melted. It's the only way I can describe it. Mm. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm glad I remembered and was willing to go down that alley,
So is that around the time that you started doing this work and finding this, or did you know the stuff before you fell into depression?
Depression was way before I found this work. Yeah. So I went the traditional route at first. I remember I was working at University of Michigan. I was there doing occupational safety, environmental health. Had an office basement. Maybe that didn't help. So not a lot of sunlight, sort of recessed away from people quite a bit. And there were just times when, and I was really good at the job and I wasn't challenged. I was just like, okay, I needed more. I love to grow and learn, and that excites me. And so I would remember just days of sitting there and just being like, okay, I've got to do some work, and just feeling like I just couldn't do anything. And my sisters would tell me, you've got to get help. Just call for they had to say it over and over again. I just couldn't. It's like being in Jello. I just couldn't pick up the phone. So then I went the traditional route, and I think it was fine, but it didn't get to that core like the way meditation did. And I did the same thing with anxiety, and that was a 6-year process. And it was a matter of telling myself my thoughts are not always true. And because I was having anxiety about my to-do list. And then I also believe in choosing love over fear. And I was thinking about a Marianne Williamson quote, and that my thoughts are not always true. And then I could feel the anxiety lessen. And I had to keep telling myself that. It was my mantra for a while. And then it was a couple years later, I was sitting on the couch in now a second home. Like, I remember the moments because these were big changes. Like, wow, why is there a knot in my stomach? And it was like almost like if you were holding your abs in, but it wasn't external, it was internal. And I was like, wow, I've had that my whole life. I was over 50 at the time. So I've had that over 50 years, somewhere between 50 and 55. And did a body scan, the meditation where you focus on specific areas slowly and really are curious. And you can just think about crazy stuff like your nose for a long, long time. People don't spend much time just focusing on their own bodies. And so I just focused, and it went away. And then 2 years later, I was using Dispenza's NeuroChange, Change Your Mind. I can't think of the name of the book right now, about breaking habits. Anyway, and working with a private client over the phone. And one of the practices is to think of what's a feeling that you have on a regular basis that you don't want. And I try to do the practices with my clients until I no longer really have anything to work with. And at the time I thought frustration. I was still feeling this frustration, and again related to anxiety, again related to the to-do list. And then the practice is to write down all the thoughts associated with the feelings. So if you can imagine the feelings at the center of a quilt, right? It's that center patch, and all the thoughts around it are holding it in place. And so maybe worthiness is one. And so you cut the thoughts, and of course it's a practice, right? And eventually, and I was journaling, I got rid of the thoughts that were holding that feeling in place. And then aside from just normal, occasional overwhelm or frustration or something, I don't live in that state anymore. But it was that buried, like you said, habits and beliefs from childhood.
Yeah. I tell a story all the time. My dad was a very abusive guy, and my mom left him when I was in 6th grade, and we ended up moving into a town next to it. But he'd always come and just ring our doorbell, and we had this doorbell that would just, if you push the button and held it down, it'd just ring, and it was like I could still hear it in my head right now. It's like just this loud, just like buzz, and you just sit and hold that thing for hours. And so we'd be in our house trying to ignore this guy standing on our porch holding the button down, and so. Going into adulthood, even now, I catch myself every now and then where if somebody knocks on the door, it's a natural reaction to be like, "Who's there? Who's there?" Like it's hardly noticeable, but before, like when me and my wife first got together, like you got to go to the door, somebody's here,
right?
And I couldn't figure. It wasn't like I knew there was no danger, knew there was no fear. I knew that, but for some reason, it was that natural. Whenever the door knocked on the door, I'd get that. I gotta go hide kind of thing, kind of atmosphere. It's like unraveling that, going and doing that work, like shifting and creating new memories around that is, I can't run from that. I can't hide from it. I can't change it. I got to go through it in order to change those reactions. I can't do anything else.
Yeah. And the awareness that you have, that you know that you need to go that way, is amazing, right? But a lot of people have, it's debilitating, and safety is one of the most important things.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know pretty much anything about your relationship with your wife, but I'm sure there must have been some safety.
Oh, for sure.
Right? And
Yeah.
that allowed a progression.
Yep. Yeah. That's so funny. I never really thought about that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we heal through relationships. So that was a big part of transformation for me in my life recently, is that finding someone who I'm really safe with, someone who I could use, because my dad was an alcoholic. He was, just verbally abrupt at times and disruptive, and like two different personalities.
Yeah.
And things like, don't cry, or I'll give you something to cry about. I think a lot of us heard that when we were younger, but it's like, wow. And my mom was very verbose, and like a child. She was orphaned when she was little. So she was like someone her children parented. We parented her.
Wow. Okay.
And so I grew up without really feeling that I could say things, that I could set limits and boundaries. And it's this realization in a really safe space that, wow, it's okay. And that has been changing everything. And it's amazing, because it's like, I think there's times in life where you think, I'm done growing, or, I've evolved, like I'm here, and then it's like, wow, there's more.
I've made it.
I can rest now.
That's what's so cool to me about life, though. And I guess it's all about perception. We talk about the perceptions, but to me, it's like, that's the journey that we're on. We get to learn, grow. I remember one of my biggest mentors. He had one of the coolest things he had said to me is like, the coolest thing about getting older is you see and remember yourself when you were younger, and you can see that growth.
Yeah.
That's like, I can remember my thoughts when I was 21. Like, to think about how far I've come, and that is like, It's incredible. It's fun, to think about responses. I've apologized to a lot of people.
Everyone, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we become different people. And I look back too over the years of just even less than, from 21 for sure, but even more recently. I told, again, my daughter when I was talking to her on the way in, and I said, just remember, you've been through this before. Like, if we always think, like, because we all have moments where it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to get all these things done. And you go, okay, I've done this before. I'm going to be fine,
Yep.
But we tend to get ourselves going and then literally trip ourselves up.
So I was working with a sales. I was one of my clients is a salesperson for one of my clients, and there's a lot of services, things are changing, and she was freaking out the other day. And so we went through a session, and then I texted her a reminder today about how your mind is an excellent servant, terrible master, and how what you focus on is going to be true. What you look for, you're going to find. If you think that all this stuff is too confusing and too overwhelming, and then you're going to find all the evidence to support that case. You're going to find all the evidence that says, I can't do this.
Right.
But if you remember that you're a badass that can accept a challenge, and that you've been here before, and you've probably been through worse, and that you handle that just fine, you will now start to see, how do I solve this? Where's the beauty in it? How do I take this to a different level?
Right. And in the present moment, there's creative possibilities. So if we're focusing on how to solve it analytically, we're almost always drawing from the past, or maybe we're researching Google or something, right? But the answer is truly within. And I've told some friends, many friends and family who, people are always having struggles. There's always things in life. And I said, in 2022, it's the first year I really, really learned, and I'm going to say the word prayer, but it could be, if people believe in the universal energy of nature, whatever it is, you set that mental intention, right? But then you feel it as if it's already true. And then, so basically, if it's a positive thought, like, oh man, I really want this problem to be resolved, but I'm not worthy. Like how I was feeling that day with the monetary gift. The positive gets canceled by the negative. But if you have both positive, right? And you actually believe it. And like I say, even add gratitude as the multiplier,
Yes.
as if it's already true, which means you can't walk around and want anymore. And a lot of these are Dispenza's theories, but I've sort of modified it into a mathematical equation. It's like, it changes. Literally, you can measure that electromagnetic field around you. You know, just like we can feel an energy in a room if someone walks in and they're in a bad mood or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
how impactful is that energy? You talk about somebody that's in a bad mood, they walk in, you feel that energy, versus somebody that comes in and is like, picks you up, is, you know, that difference and that difference in momentum of what they're going to create through the day. You know, that person that's in a bad mood and wants everybody to feel it is going to create carnage, and they're going to create more mess into their life. They're going to get the things that they don't want.
right.
So we talk about, you know, why is this science? Why is it woo-woo? We think about just from that concept of that. If you're walking around in a bad mood, like nothing good happens for me. You know, I had one time where I ran out of gas on the way to a meeting, and I was early to the meeting and I ran out of gas. And so not only was I late, you know, now I didn't make it to the meeting and all this stuff. Now, then I had to walk and all these things. And like, as I was walking, it was like, I'm not going to let this become a bad day. This was a bad event that happened within the day. But what happens is a lot of times we focus on that one thing that happened, and now we draw more bad day into it. And we're like, see, I told you it was a horrible day.
Right.
Like, yay, I won. See, I told you.
Yeah. There's 99 things that are great, right?
Yeah.
Just that
but
power.
Our mind is that tuning fork, right? And we're tuned in, and we're only seeing the things that are bad coming in.
Right. Right. So Dr. Rick Hansen is I always forget if I think he's a neuropsychiatrist, but he's into that neuroscience. I was on the Dr. Nandy show with him years ago, and he wrote, I think it's called Hardwiring Happiness. And anyway, so he gives this amazing story, and it's often used now in conversations where people talk about this kind of stuff, but it's basically about eat lunch or be lunch. And so if you're not focused on, if you're the bunny rabbit or whatever in the field munching the carrots in the grass, and you're not aware of the tiger, that's your last eating lunch. So you have to over focus on the tiger.
Yeah.
But now, so he coined the term paper tiger. So now the paper tigers are all those worries in our minds, and we're literally affecting our physiology. We're turning on and off hormones, right? That are then it's a cascade. One thing leads to the next. Like cortisol tends to hold weight onto our bodies.
It really does. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And oxytocin and serotonin and all the happy, good things that we can choose to focus on those, but we don't. We have to learn that we no longer need to, it's okay that we ran out of gas. What's the opportunity in that moment?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Instead. And no one's going to be 100% of the time, but if you can just remember that most of the time.
In the result of that story, I ended up walking. So like what was happening, I ended up walking a long distance to a gas station. I finally found a gas station. I went to that gas station and they didn't have any gas cans. So like, they were like, there's an auto parts store up there. So I had to walk another like mile to the auto parts store. And it was like, it was winter. So it was like cold out. Right. And so I'm walking, and it was like, I decided this is not going to be a bad day. Right. Because I was going and I'm mad, and I'm like going to take it out on this person, whoever's behind this counter. Now they're probably not going to help me, right? Because I'm going to come in with no. So I shifted my attitude, and it was like, where is the opportunity in this?
Yeah.
What is the beauty in this? Because there's beauty in everything. There's, you know, like what is, and I ended up meeting some incredible people. One guy drove me to my car, like, you know, like, and then one of my managers came and picked me up. We ended up having an incredible conversation. Like there's just good things that came out of it, you know, like, but it didn't have to be that way. I could have sabotaged that for sure.
Yeah. I love that about, you know, our community, the people around us. And one of the things I was thinking about with that is, again, how we are affected by the energy of the people around us. And I wanted to mention Brighton Lighthouse. And that's actually what brought me here, because I met Sherry of Good Fat Life and did a podcast with her.
Yeah.
I've done many networking groups, but it is amazing. And they're good.
Yeah.
But to be in the energy of these people who are all focused on the good,
Yeah,
right? They're
the
all
light.
Yeah, the light. Exactly. Good. Yeah, good way to say it. They're all focused on the light. And I was like, I feel almost like a broken record because we'll go around the room. Well, what's your most positive thing today? I just love you people. You know,
love you people.
I love being here. There's so much. They are always putting that that forward.
Yeah.
And you can just see it, the fruits of their labor.
Anna and Dan Oginski, just incredible people. I'm so blessed to have met them and had them in my life. It's like those are the people that I'll walk up to in the middle of the crowded street and hug, like they're just incredible people. But again, great name for a business because they are those light people. And then to attract those people into that, you talk about purposely and intentionally building a culture, building something, to name it that way and to intentionally bring those types of people into that environment, in 2020 in this whole thing, it's created an environment where the light keepers, the people that all of us have a bigger platform because we're more needed now more than ever.
Yeah.
So we find the beauty, we talk about that there's beauty in everything. There was so much panic through 2020.
Exactly.
And I said that early on. It's like, there's so much for us to go out there because there's so many people in pain. There is a world that's divided. Like if we can go out there and unite, it's not just about me.
Right.
It's about finding more yous and more Brians and just continuing to build that community. And together we overpopulate the crap that's out there, or we just create really great worlds for us. Either way, I'm fine. No, I'm just joking.
I think it definitely rubs off a little bit. So I started doing a love-based donation offering, basically, because it's like, so I realized this after I started doing that I can't remember exactly what year. I think it was maybe 21.
Yeah.
That the Surgeon General declared an epidemic of mental health concerns for adolescents, which is 12 to 25 is what I've been taught as an adolescent. And I've seen myself, friends, even adults, right? And children who are waitlisted and including people in my family, too. And so it's a challenge and reaches home, with the suffering. And so I have an amazing, wonderful mentor in my life named Shannon Kennedy. She goes by Mother Firefly. She's been doing love-based donation, healing, and sessions for people, leading meditations or healing sound bowl meditations too, for years and years and years. So I started working at the Yoga Center for Healthy Living and decided I wanted to do that. And it really made this huge shift in my life because there was one person in the audience one day who wasn't able to attend the session too. And I just said, let's just, we'll do it. You're going back to New York, but let's just do this anyway. And don't worry about money. So I decided to do therapy sessions, essentially, or coaching sessions, love-based donation. And she was my first client. And I don't know what it is, if it's the intention behind that, or if it's the fact that people so need it who maybe can't afford it, or people are waitlisted, but I started growing more private clients through doing that. And I had my daughter, who is at Oregon State University, make flyers for me and put stuff on Instagram and everything to basically spread the word. And I want to put them in schools and, just continue to offer that to people. And it's like, some people will pay more. Some people will pay like what I go for typically, and some might not be able to pay at all.
Yeah.
But overall, that creates an effect of helping. And I always tell people that even if there are times when someone's not paying me, I think of it in terms of, I don't know if you have kids. My kids are in this world.
Yeah.
The more of a better world this is, because we're able to manage our emotions. We're able to create what we want instead of be victims, right? To be victors instead, the better world it's going to be. And to tie back into that poverty story that my daughter's writing about in Oregon, I brought up Martin Luther King, Viktor Frankl. They had to not be overcome by their environment. They had to think greater than their environment in order to stay in a positive mindset. They had to dig deep into a vision, right? To see things as different. They couldn't think about, there were times when their bodies felt, especially I'm thinking Viktor Frankl, the conditions that he lived in. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning. For anyone in your audience who doesn't know who he is, it's a stellar must read. And he survived, and that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to thrive, not just survive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the training through Joe Dispenza's workshop is to think greater than your body, greater than your environment, and greater than time. And when you can do that and stay in that present moment and not be attached to the outcome and how it happens, that's when miracles happen. To go back to that equation,
Yep.
miracles are when you think, this is what I want. This is how it feels, like you said with your health,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I'm grateful. I'm no longer coming from lack. And now I'm going to stay in the present moment, because in that present moment is when the opportunity is going to come in. It's when creative answers will arise as we're not analyzing and trying to seek for them. Right?
Mm-hmm. That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. It's like, I'm so glad it's like going back to being when I was sick, and it's like envisioning. It's not just I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be sick. I had to mentally put myself in a space of not feeling, of feeling. It's again watching what words matter, right? It's not feeling sick. I had to feel what it felt like to feel good. I had to mentally put myself in a space of where I felt good. Not that I didn't feel sick, that I felt good.
Right. Well, you think about a vacation. I don't know if you like to travel. I love to travel.
Yeah.
So we're getting ready to do an Eastern Caribbean cruise, and it started with an idea.
Yeah.
And then that feeling helps you get through. Like the planning has been, wow. Well, if I had thought about the planning ahead of time, I'd be like, I don't really want to do that. But the feeling gives the motivation.
Yeah.
Just like we talked about Martin Luther King or Viktor Frankl or there's many more people. Those are the two that just happen to come to mind. But that gives the motivation. And imagination is so undervalued, and I wonder, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I have found that recently more men are starting to be interested in mindset, in meditation, perhaps practices like yoga, qigong, different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would love to do is I help, and maybe it's not even directly through me, but it's like, what's the limiting factor? Why isn't it more exponential? Why is it like even in Brighton Lighthouse, the networking meetings, it's Brian.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
of course, Dan's doing his things. But as far as members go, that's the one who's showing up. Or you go to a yoga class and there's, it's getting a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I have some young men who are interested, the more young men, but it's like, I feel like that's curiosity.
It's another thing that Brian and I have cried in public together. In fact, I've talked about it a couple times in an episode. My dog had just passed away, and we were at a coffee shop, and we were talking about grief as an entrepreneur, and like we got really into this emotional conversation, and the gentleman between us was so uncomfortable. He kept on trying to change the subject and talk about something more serious and more business-like, to the point where he finally got up and walked away. But what was really cool is that everybody else moved in, because we attracted the people that wanted to be part of the conversation, and the gentleman that was uncomfortable left. Now, everybody that was there that moved in was female. The other man left. Me and Brian were the only two males there. I don't know what is it? There's a lot. There's the being a strong male syndrome, not having, being told strong men don't cry, that kind of thing. We've got to be tough. We've got to carry, kind of the shame of admitting that you have feelings and vulnerabilities and that could be wrong. There's so much that goes into that. And that's I guess the biggest thing that I hope out of just going public with all my podcasts and anything that I talk in public is being 5,000% me. I'm not afraid to cry. I've cried in this show so many times when people tell me their story. Like I've did a whole episode by myself talking about people dying, my dog dying, and just cried the whole entire time. And that was the episode that Johnny was like, you need to talk to Trice. But then what was really cool is like, I just had a therapy session for myself. I kind of talked it out loud. I shared it. I've had so many people that have reached out to me about it. But what was really cool is at the end, Johnny came in and it impacted him, that episode. Wow. And it was so cool to see it happen in kind of real time. And we were able to sit and like I hope Johnny doesn't hate me for this, but we were able to cry together and hug each other as men standing right here.
Yeah.
And like, I went home and I'm like, that's the mission right there. You know,
Absolutely.
that's the mission right there, is for us as men to be able to hug each other, cry, to say, I love you. You know, I don't know. I know there's a lot of factors that play into why it's not commonplace, but if I can be an example in the light and show people why they should, or show people that not even why they should, but that it's okay.
Right.
I think because that's the biggest thing is worried about what people are going to think about you.
You're right. Leading by example. I mean, there's a lot of people I try to reach out to, and it's like they have to see that my life is different or that I'm calmer. But
yeah,
I appreciate when men are like that. Dan gave a speech at the Brighton Lighthouse member meeting the other day, and I was so touched by how he brought up feelings so many times and his dreams and, you know, all that went into it. And he wasn't afraid. And I thought, and you could tell he'd been thinking that way for years. And so it's a process.
It is. Yeah.
We're getting closer. You know,
you know, the process of this, like, you know, like putting content out there. When I started my business, like it took me, I had my initial video, one of my initial videos pop up in my newsfeed the other day. And it took me like 4 hours to make that video. And it was like 9 minutes long. It took me 4 hours. I was so in my head. I did so many retakes. And then I was worried, is anybody going to watch it? And then nobody watched it. I'm like, oh, it's garbage. You know, like I'm like, and then I like, but you know, I'm like thinking of like, people don't look at me that way, or like I'm all that little talk that I'm having in my head.
Right.
And then one day I went out, even though nobody's commenting on it, nobody's liking it. One day I went out and I was at a networking meeting and somebody pulled me aside and was like, thank you for what you said in that video the other day. It really impacted me. And like, it was a really emotional moment. It was like, you know what? The people I'm speaking to aren't going to be the ones that say, that's me. Right. Point a spotlight at me. Right. Like, no, they're in their vulnerability, right? Like I've got to show them how to claim that and be confident in that.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. It's interesting because, again, it's that whole paradigm of fear. And if it's something seems really essential, like doing well, because it's your livelihood, then there's that attachment to it working out, and that literal clinging keeps you stuck. Yeah. You know, so
the clinging keeps you stuck.
Oh,
you will be there's a law of the lid, right? You will only go as far as your mind will take you. Mm-hmm. When I started my business, I literally, my boss gave me a lump sum of money because she knew I always wanted to start my business, and she was like, "You taking care of me, I want to take care of you." And so it was super awesome. It was one of the happiest days of my life. I'm driving home. I'm so excited. I get to finally do this thing that I've been dreaming about forever. I better enjoy it while it lasts, I thought. What is this, like? I have enough money to last like 6, 7, 8 months. You know, build my business, like do these things. Like, I need to enjoy this while it lasts, because it will never last more than a year, right? Right. Like and guess what? 6, 7, 8 months down the road, I'm about to lose my business because I have no money, right? And I'm stressing, and I'm the cortisol is going through my body. I don't want to wake up in the morning, right? I'm like, all those things are happening, and it's like just frozen. And then remembering, going back, taking a deep breath, steaming my clothes in the morning one day, and I woke up, you know, a couple weeks in a row of getting your bank account is low emails, and it's like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm getting no money in. I'm steaming my clothes, thinking about what are my options. I'm just taking deep breaths, like in reset. And then I started thinking about, I've been here before. I've put my back against the wall before. This is not even the worst situation I've been in by far. And then thinking about all those situations, I started thinking about all the times that I've had my back against the wall led to the biggest comebacks in my life. What did I do in those times? And then I've come across, to your point, the biggest answer. I wasn't doing what I teach other people to do. I was going out selling, thinking about, I need money. I need to pay my bills. I need to, make sure my family has food on the table. And what I teach people from a sales standpoint is you got to think about the other person. The other person's the most important person. If I'm thinking about myself, I'm never going to sell. And so I'm failing because, one, I've doomed myself with my mindset that I've created this lid that I'm never going to last longer than this. Yeah. So I better enjoy it while it lasts. That's sabotage. I'm never going to last longer than that. I have an expiration date that I've created in my mind. Right? Yeah. And then the second thing is I'm going out and doing things opposite of what I would coach other people, and then I can't understand why the people that I'm coaching are not doing the things I'm talking about. I'm not leading by example. I'm doing the opposite of what I would do. Yeah. And so those major realizations changed my whole entire life, changed my business, and now it's been over 5 years.
Wow. That's fabulous. I love that. And it's like you shifted into just having fun with it too.
And I had fun with it.
Yeah. Like
As soon as it was like
huge.
making it about other people and not about, am I going to pay my bills?
Right.
All
Not
of a sudden,
fear-based.
not fear-based, and not like, oh my God, I've got to close this client. No, like there are so many people that I don't want to work with and that I can't work with and that I'm never going to change and that are not going to, I had a conversation with somebody the other day that was a referral and it was like, awesome guy, not mine. Like, I know that I'll probably never make an impact with them just from our conversation that we had.
Right.
Nothing against him. It's just, we don't fit.
Yeah. And there's plenty of people. It's like if you don't have that lack mindset, then you know you're not thinking about competition. And
No.
years ago, when I started my nonprofit for mindfulness and education, I was also still working at U of M. And one of the women in the nonprofit coached the men's basketball team, and I was starting to coach the women's softball team. And I was going to her for mentorship, right?
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't I? I remember someone saying, well, you better be careful about how much you talk to her about that because she might take it over. And I was like, no, no, you're missing the point,
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't blame them because that's sort of how we were as a society. And people like us definitely see where we're headed.
Yeah.
And just continuing to, again, be that inspiration and live our lives. And if we can help one person, that's one more person who then maybe helps others.
Yep.
Right.
Come along, get on the bus. Let's pay it forward, right? Because the more we can add on, the more we can have that are paying it forward, and the more the world's going to be impacted.
Absolutely. Yeah. So almost spring break's coming up.
Yeah.
Almost a year ago, this is a cool story. I was invited by a new friend. It was the second time I'd ever met her. She said, come along with us on spring break to the ocean in North Carolina, Outer Banks. And I was like, okay, I can't resist that.
Yeah.
So a house full of about 20 people, I'd say 4 adults or something like that, mostly kids. And this is sort of a leaning into men, like the thing I brought up earlier, and a positive vibe, if you will. So the family was interested in neuroscience and meditation and all that. And they asked me to talk on it, or, we just ended up in conversations. Were asking for my, what I know and I could contribute. And they asked me to lead meditations. And it was one of the most beautiful times of my life because, again, so often it was kids or women.
Yeah.
The 15-year-old boys were the ones who were asking for another meditation and another meditation.
That's
thought,
beautiful.
yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Happy.
If you can reach the kids, that's what really matters, right?
So many adults I've taught have said, if I knew this when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
And I want to say this for parents out there. If you think, you're trying to teach your kids some of these practices, it sounds counterintuitive, but the children who are the most resistant, the hardest to reach, are often the ones who will end up holding on to this. They might be hiding in the treehouse or in their room. They'll start to do these practices. And I've seen time and time again, because I've worked in many, many schools in lower socioeconomic areas from Detroit all the way up to the Upper Peninsula. And it's the kids who are being abused, who have had many deaths. I mean, some really super tragic things happen, who are saying, hey, whatever I'm carrying, if it's my singing bowl or my chime, hey, can I have that? And I want to lead the class, And it's like, yeah, we learn from those kids.
Well, again, if they pick it up earlier, there's less trauma, less scars. It's closer to be able to go back and go back to the surface or go back to the core, right. of the issue.
Well, and it's about being, you think about bullying is wrong.
Yeah.
But life bullies us.
Yeah.
And everyone, I think, maybe has an innate desire to be strong. But if you can be strong on the inside, if life can come along and push you and you're like, I'm okay. It's my car, flat tire.
Yep.
Right? I'm not going to let that take my joy. In fact, I try to train myself, and I did it for a while, and it's pretty easy now because I've made it a habit. But wake up in the morning, what emotion do I want to feel today? It's playful.
Yeah.
Right? And even have a jar next to your bed of little papers with good feelings. And when you make it playful, and it's just even things I want to sometimes just for fun, Jason, I'll just be like last summer, it's just like, I think I want someone to give me a car, and within 2 weeks, someone did. So I know. And I use that example because it's tangible.
Yeah.
But it's like even better than that is, relationships that are positive. I've had many challenging relationships in my life, and I no longer find myself in the center of those. Right? Like that's where it's at. Relationships are the most important currency. Abundance is freedom, right?
Yep. But relationships are the most important currency. It's so true. Trice, how do you work with people now? To kind of bring it to end, I would be remiss to not share with people how they can contact you or how they can work with you.
Yeah, well, I know we said that we're going to put it in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes, yep.
So we'll do that. My website is triceberlinski.com. I'm working on getting that back up today. I did something to it. But Instagram is Miss Mindfulness. And again, look at that in the show notes because of how it's done. I have a YouTube channel, and I work with people it was an overused term for a long time, but an organic way. Uh-huh. So clients one-on-one, group settings, schools, businesses, sports teams. I've worked with Girl Scouts. Just almost every subject, suicide and grief and cancer. I've worked with the Cancer Center. It's just, to me, it's like whatever comes to me, if it just seems to be happening. And a lot of times if my mind gets in the way, like we've already talked about, and I think, oh, I'm going to do this because this is going to be what I should, this is in the analytical. And then I will tell you, I had a calling in 2011 to teach mindfulness to kids, and I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
So that didn't come from my brain.
Yeah.
It came from, I was doing a lot of soul searching after my second parent, my mom, died, and it came to me that way, but it wasn't a thought. And so what I've seen over the years is regardless of where I think I want to go, I'm always diverted back to working with kids. And I mean, that might mean working with their parents at times. It might be working in a business, but eventually it goes back to the kids.
Yep. So awesome. Everybody listens to the show. I'm such a proponent of reaching out and connecting. And, that's how all the guests that I have on the show end up being on the show. We connect, we stay in touch, we build relationships, and and then that's how that happens. Same thing. If there's something we talked about today and you want to reach out, reach out, contact Trice, and you'll have an incredible conversation.
Yes.
Impactful.
Thank you. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Thank you.
I'll do the same for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.